Welcome to Momentous Live, episode 10. Or, if you're an Apple fanboy, or I guess
it'd be 10.
There's a 10 box? Is that? No,
Well,
that's not a
no,
thing.
isn't that sorry, that's the whole thing with Final Cut, isn't it? It went from 7 to X, not 10. Not 10.
Oh. Yes, but they called it X because it wasn't 10, but with Mac OS 10, they called it 10 because it was 10, and then we had how many
Windows
versions?
10 as well.
We had 20 versions, but they don't use X, do they, for Windows 10?
No, it's just a 10.
But they've got Xbox Series X.
That's true.
So, hi, I'm Tristan Jutra, and we have...
I can't tell you
pointing to.
Grace Gray, William Silver, and Tasia Custodi in the flesh. Tasia couldn't be with us this week, so we have yet another show with three middle-aged white guys.
Didn't see that coming.
Also known as Three Men and a Maybe.
I'm just going to sit here and drink some water. That's what
I did fill out my census today, so it is census day here. Did you guys get that done?
Yes, but I didn't know that it should have been done today, so I did it last week.
I think you were allowed to do that anytime up to this point.
It says you're actually supposed to do it on census day because it asks you about what happens in the week prior. So I used my future technology and guessed what was going to happen in the future and submitted it early. So
I guess you have the long form. I had the short form. It didn't ask me that. So
Jamie,
yes.
This is on record. Why are you telling people?
I know. I've got it on camera. I don't know. I'm sure Facebook is watching the whole thing. Yeah, it's. I haven't turned off my location tracking. It's crazy.
And now we have dirty data. Everything is ruined. Thanks.
Scrap the whole thing.
Yeah, I had the long form too. Long form as well.
Oh, I think
100 questions.
Really?
Holy Lord!
It was significant. Yeah.
I was done in about 5 minutes.
Me too.
Yeah. Yeah. It got really weird when they started asking when was the last time you clipped your toenails. I thought, what are you talking about, man?
It's crucial information, really.
Maybe it was a different questionnaire I was answering now that I think about it.
Oh.
Anyways.
Can I overstate the number of people in our household so we get more tax dollars allocated to our writing?
I claim the bear, so we're good, right?
It is Perfect. A dependent.
Yeah.
So a special welcome to Jamie Reynolds, a friend of the show. Long-time friend of some, long-time friend of some folks here. And we should have a good, fun hour together. I mean, no Tasia, but I'm sure you'll do your best.
I will try. I'll try and go a little falsetto now and then, but, I can only do that for so long.
So our first story today, most people are embracing iOS 14.5's new anti-tracking features. As iPhones and iPads make it easier for users to avoid being tracked, one estimate says 89% of them worldwide are choosing to do so. There was another study that actually said 96% of them were choosing to do so. So that means only somewhere between 4 and 11% of people are saying, yes, please track me across all websites and apps, Facebook. And, as we've alluded to in the past, this major change, which Apple gave months and months of warning for, they actually delayed the rollout once and since rolled it out into iOS 14.5 and iPadOS 14.5. People knew, the digital marketing advertising industry knew there was going to be repercussions, and now they're starting to feel them. Graham, what are your thoughts on this this whole situation? Is this overdue, or is this a travesty against the marketing technology, the MarTech industry?
Well, I mean, I was writing a blog today that said, marketing in the age of do not track. And the whole point is this is not the apocalypse that people think it's going to be. There are a couple of things to think about here, right? There are, clients, people who want advertising done for them. There are marketers who do the advertising and the people who have things advertised to them. And all of those groups, kind of interrelate in a very close way. This is clear, right? Users don't want to have this kind of invasive thing going on in their lives. And so as a marketer, if you're looking at this and going, I've lost something. No, you've had one tool taken out of your toolbox. So all of this stuff happened before Do Not Track existed. We were able to market to people before social media and digital marketing existed. So this is going to be painful for some groups out there. The folks who maybe didn't market before social and digital, they probably got a pretty steep learning curve right now. But you know what, kids, welcome to the show. This is how this works. As somebody who is in the marketing industry and as somebody who does not want to be tracked, this to me is actually good news. This is hard work. And so you're going to have to work a little bit harder to get your message out. But the message that you do get should go to people who are receptive, just simply from the fact that they don't feel like their lives are being pried into. I think we've all had that moment, right? You know, you're sitting there and you're like, I was talking to somebody about air conditioning, and all of a sudden I'm getting ads for air conditioning. And there are a number of reasons for that. Somebody on the same IP address in your house searched for that, or you were talking about being too hot in the house, or just things of that nature. The algorithms were very good at determining, based on what you were searching for, but based on what you were doing, the things that probably they should advertise to you. That can't happen anymore. Okay.
And I think people were, can get a little bit paranoid, thinking all their devices are listening to them all the time, including their phones. Like some devices are, but the whole thing about, oh yeah, we were talking about this, and then we started seeing ads for that, forgetting the fact that they also had been searching for that stuff earlier in the day, and so on and so forth. So you get a little bit of confirmation bias going on there. Now, Facebook had said months out that this is going to hurt small businesses and so on. Jamie, as a small business owner, I know you've done some marketing online with Google and other places. How do you feel about not being able to access as much targeting information for potential clients?
Well, from a purely selfish point of view, I would say, it affects me negatively. But it depends on who I'm marketing towards. So one of the things I've noticed is that I would say 50% of the people looking at the ads maybe I'm going to say maybe 40% are coming from, say, iOS devices. And then everything else, it's a mishmash of lots of different things from there, PC stuff, and you're going to get different things looking at it. But I think ultimately, my type of business is generally word of mouth. So the advertising that I do is generally trying to capture people who are looking for a specific type of product, and if I can't get to them, I just won't get their eyeballs on my ad, but neither will anybody else. So in the end, it's kind of a wash. What I am thinking of doing, though, is focusing more of my ads on Google focus things where I can actually get more eyeballs on my ads. And that was something that I was reading up on, apparently, as a company called Apps Flyer that does some advertising research. And they've said they've already noticed a huge change or a change at least in money going away from into more Android ecosystem stuff where they can actually put their money and get those eyeballs on ads. So that's kind of what I've already been doing, and that'll probably continue.
And part of it sort of speaks to the difference between intention-based versus interest-based. So on Facebook, it's mostly interest-based. You target people based on their demographics and to a certain extent their psychographics. Facebook has limited more and more as time goes on the kind of information we can learn about people. For example, you can't target people by race and so on. There have been some roundabout ways to get that based on interest. But with Google Ads, that is intention-based. Someone is going to a search engine and looking for something. So they're probably a little further down the sales funnel and a bit more relevant for a business like yours than just that passive interest-based stuff that is floating out there. Similar to like a magazine ad or a billboard ad.
But it's still based on what people are inputting into their computers and tracking that information. So if I can use that information to get to people that actually want the products, then great. So there's a fine line, I think, between people intentionally looking at stuff and just curious about stuff that get fed ads. Where do you draw the line? So it's interesting.
We should mention here as well that when we're looking at this, being able to target someone and say, based on demographics and psychographics, I want to present this ad to this person. What we're starting to see limited, though, is the ability for that data to track you around between different apps and different websites. And so you don't get served a follow-up ad because you saw it on site A when you're browsing site B. We're starting to see the limiting of that. And I think that really is, for some marketers, the idea of being able to have that follow-up ad, being able to sort of retarget that person a secondary time, third time, fourth time, fifth time. I think we've all seen that ad where you're like, fine, I'll click on you just so you go away. It doesn't help, by the way. That just makes it worse.
Remarketing and retargeting is immensely powerful, but anyone I've ever talked to about it has been creeped out by it. And But people wouldn't do it if it wasn't effective, right? They say you need at least 7 marketing impressions to get someone to actually take action on a thing. But I remember an instance a few years ago where I was doing some Christmas shopping and I looked at the website allposters.com, and they have more than just posters. They also have t-shirts and other things. And then later on, I went to another website and I saw a dynamically generated banner ad that didn't just have one product that I looked at. It had 5 different products that I looked at. And I was actually really impressed. I took a screenshot of that and started showing it in the classes I was teaching on digital marketing. So,
oh, sorry. I was just going to say.
I was just going to throw to you, Will. What do you think?
Sorry. Well, I was just going to jump in because I think there's a really interesting discussion here, and I kind of brought it up. I think last week when we were sort of talking about some of this stuff coming in, is that the whole conversation between intention and interest, and it leads into, and again, I'm not as much in the marketing realm, I'm more in the web realm, but I deal a lot with stats, as I've said before. And I think there's a really big thing about quality versus quantity, right? It's not just the number, it's what that number means. And sometimes that's lost when you look so much at the numbers, where you don't see the actual values in the numbers. And I know there's ways of interpreting it, there's other measurements, but part of what I always focus on is just, make good content, make good engaging content is sort of the first rule of it. And the other stuff should kind of follow. Now, numbers help guide you about where some things should go or decisions that you're making, at least from a web content point of view. But I think sometimes we can get way too caught up in the numbers and not concentrate enough on not just the raw numbers that someone can deliver, to your point about Facebook versus, actually Googling something. And what that means about engaging in that audience.
The interesting thing is that this is not the first time Apple has done this either. There's been a series of steps over the last few years whereby they have increasingly asked for permission for various things like location tracking, access to Bluetooth, which, there are Bluetooth beacons out in the retail world, for example. And, there's that principle about privacy. It's like, what is privacy? It's not that you don't share anything about yourself. It's that you are asked permission to share this content about yourself. However, there's been a story that came out in the last day or two, and maybe we can talk about it in more detail next week, is that some people are thinking, well, is Apple is conspiring here, and maybe they're shutting Facebook out of the picture and basically carving up the market with Google. Because if you look at the terms of use, that Apple still reserves the right to use a lot of user data for first-party advertising purposes. So, maybe this is going to become the Apple-Google duopoly, and Facebook, you can wither on the vine. Good luck with it, Facebook.
It's funny that you should mention that, because Apple just today hired Antonio Garcia Martinez, who was part of the Facebook team back in 2013. And was basically the architect of some of the things that we saw Facebook grow into. We saw them do this with a Google employee who was working in their AI division, who was let go as part of the ethics scandal that's going on right now. And it seems like they're kind of snapping up talent of people who, looking at some of these systems like AI and looking at advertising, probably have the inside scoop of how not to do it. And so hopefully that actually is where this is leading, is Apple looking at this and going, okay, we want to maintain user privacy, because they've done a great deal of work to anonymize the data that they gather. So even though they're gathering that data, they're providing those things as statistics, but it's not identifiable. I think you're in a much better place than we were with Cambridge Analytica and Facebook, where it's like, this is who you are. And we kind of know the things that trigger you. So we're going to give you ads that will get you to do things or feel things.
And I think, and especially when Apple had that faux pas of giving out all the Siri voice data to subcontractors and having them analyze that without giving permission. They've learned from their mistakes as to how important user data is and how important it's to protect it, just from a PR point of view. If that never got out, nobody probably would have cared, and it probably wouldn't have mattered. And it was probably useful information that they were gleaning. But it's just not. It's becoming more and more important to silo our personal data, and part of that is not using things like Facebook and using things less, giving out less information. But it's just the nature of the world these days.
Well, and Apple, definitely the way they position themselves over the last to be fair, a decade or so, they have a lot to lose because they've been beating this privacy drum for so long. And if they fumble or stumble in a huge way, their PR team's going to be having to work on overtime to make up for that, because goodness knows, if there's anything that would send me into the loving arms of the resurrection of Windows Phone, it would be something like that. I still
Palm.
but Microsoft's been sitting back because they have an ad business through Bing, but they've been under the radar with a lot of this stuff. They're just letting Google and Facebook, fight it out with Apple, and we're just going to continue making our operating system and our Surface devices that a handful of people buy, and we'll do our own thing. And meanwhile, we also have Azure, which cloud services doing okay there. But speaking of Facebook, they're actually doing some good. They're following Twitter's lead here, and they are testing pop-up messages telling people to read a freaking link before you go and share it. Now, Twitter instituted the same sort of thing a couple of months ago, getting people to chill a bit. Now, Graham, I know that you're hot-blooded. Have you ever shared something on either Twitter or Facebook and then maybe regretted it a couple of seconds later, or maybe didn't read something all the way through before sharing it? What do you think of features like this to protect us from ourselves?
Well, I can't say I've ever regretted posting something, but never. But looking at this, I have received the pop-up. I've been on Twitter, responding to things, because sometimes you're responding to what someone has said about something as opposed to the article itself, and so you get the pop-up saying you should read the link first, and it's actually quite helpful. It takes a moment to just click through and go, in context of what this article is saying, is what this person's saying, crazy? Is it sane? Is it, where is it sort of on that scale of Facebook to Twitter? And so I've received these, and they're valuable. When we take a look at things like Betteridge's Law, when somebody, if a question is asked in a headline, the answer is usually no. When you see headlines like that, they tend to be inflammatory. They tend to be designed to drive, clicks and debate and rage. And so in a lot of cases, you see people who will knee-jerk respond to the headline without actually getting into the article. And sometimes there's actually context or subtext in the article that does justify the writer or the editor's use of that headline. But I found this is actually a helpful thing. This coming to Facebook, I think, is part of their grand process of reparations. And they've got a long way to go. The last piece of the puzzle here is knocking over the Queen and getting Mark Zuckerberg out of the board. Because really, I do think that a lot of the evil does sort of stem from that one human. Mark, if you want to talk about it, you can call me. But I think this will help. I hope it will help.
Well, it's interesting because since Twitter has instituted on their end, I don't have the stat in front of me, but I read recently that it did make a material difference on the number of people that actually took a beat and went and clicked through the link and read the article before going and retweeting it. So there, the stats are bearing out there for Twitter, and it's nice to see Facebook following the lead there, because so much of what drives these social platforms is engagement. And when you reduce the velocity, the risk is that you reduce the engagement, because if you let people give their hot takes and make their outrageous comments, you're more likely to get engagement from other people, right? So they're working against their interests in some respects to do this, but I think in the longer term interest and from a PR perspective, it's probably wise.
Now, Jamie, did you say you're off Facebook as well?
No, I just don't care enough, I guess, to worry about it. I've thought about the whole privacy thing for a while, and I'm not a big troll feeder, so I don't really. I've never run into this pop up myself. I don't share articles. I share pictures of my cat and sometimes beer, and that's kind of what I do. But I think eventually I'll probably end up stepping away from it as best as I can. I don't sign up to websites using my Facebook ID nor my Google ID. I always use just my email address and create a unique password for each one. But I've never really liked my data being out there for Facebook, especially, and then even with Google, I've never liked it. At least they kind of tell you what they're doing with it, but still, I don't share enough on the internet because I'm too old.
You're not going to see this
worry
one because you're not angry enough, and you're probably
I'm not. Yeah, exactly. So it's not going to be really an issue, but maybe one day. I don't know, but there's a benefit to Facebook, and I will say that, and there is a connection that you get out of Facebook, at least in the early stages, that did not exist and probably will not exist in the future. Things have become so fractured again, but the way that it connected everybody up, and you were able to share your life with people that you couldn't before, or just reconnect with people you hadn't seen in a long time. I think there was something positive with it. But just like humans do with all sorts of technology, we find the best and we find the worst in it, and you just have to try and mitigate those bad parts.
I think what's interesting too is that given the whole current age of misinformation and disinformation, we're seeing more and more pop-ups from fact checkers, links to information about vaccines and the origins of COVID. I haven't seen any about the shape of the Earth yet. We'll see if those pop up. But I actually shared a link yesterday on Facebook that was a bit of a humorous article from McSweeney. He's basically saying, asking the question, was it COVID vaccine side effects, or are you simply over 40? Yeah. But that prompted a flag on Facebook, with a little link to get information about COVID-19 vaccines, blah, blah, blah. It's like, okay, I've just clicked X for myself because I don't need to see that. So it does not have an irony detector at this point. We'll see as we continue to feed the machine learning algorithms.
And the other interesting thing to do with that is it starts to become a bit of a feeling of a nanny state then. Like, how much babysitting do we need to just do what we want to do? Like, how stupid is Facebook going to assume everybody is? And maybe it should assume everybody just is a little slow on the uptake on certain ideas. But it does feel a little bit like we are not intelligent enough to be able to, as a group, to be able to disseminate information properly. I don't know. There's something backwards about it.
Is it George Carlin who said, think of the average person that you know, and then realize that 50% of people are stupider than that? Facebook and Twitter over the last 4 years really did land that point for me. Sorry, Bill, you were saying.
I love. If you can ever throw in a George Carlin reference, please do. I think I agree with all that you guys are saying. I think the other point that's just a little interesting on top of it, I don't know how many of you have ever talked to someone and they're like, did you hear what Bonnie Henry said? She said blank, blank, blank. Oh, really? And you ask a follow-up question and they say, oh no, I just read the headline. I don't know the context. So this is part of the thing is if you're going to share information, maybe you should read a little bit more, get a little bit more details, be more well-informed. Also, this would stop, say, articles with clickbait headlines, which are actually saying something else, actually in the editorial part of it, and just getting you to share things around. That happens sometimes as well. You think it's one thing and then you click in and it's something else. But to Jamie's point, I think maybe this will help, people be less lazy and not just read headlines, but actually read the story and have an opinion and not just take what the editorial, 40 characters say, and actually, use some independent thought, maybe.
I think ultimately,
too much.
ultimately, and I've had this discussion with many of my friends, Tristan included, I believe. But I think we just need a better education on what critical thinking is. I think that's ultimately with the problem with a lot of what goes on in our society these days. Teaching people how to think critically is lost. It's just lost on so many people. And it's because there's just too much information to absorb all at once. We just can't do it enough.
There's a great article too. Sorry to jump in, but my sister, who's a lawyer, one of her friends posted an article that was a whole thing on expertise versus opinion. And that the expertise of someone who has gone to university and studied a subject or spent their whole life, even at something like wood carving, it doesn't have to be something academic that we put sort of errors on. Even if you've done wood carving your whole life, you are an expert in wood carving. And someone who just reads a bunch of articles for a month on wood carving cannot compete with your 20 years of knowledge and training under a wood carving master. It's not the same opinion that can be given by the same people. And I feel like sometimes
if they're an excellent orator, they'll sound like they know more than the actual wood carver, and that's the problem. Whether it's via text or via voice, and you will be able to get those eyeballs on you versus the person who should have the eyeballs.
Well, we all know what they say about opinions.
They're like wood carvers.
Easy.
Everyone has one, and everyone thinks everyone else stinks. The stinking wood carvers. Well, that's the thing is with so much social media, and especially the fast mediums like Twitter, not lots of time for nuance. Again, pro tip to everyone out there: read the frickin' article before you share it, before you give your hot takes. Get the context. Look for nuance, because it's really hard to do nuance otherwise. Look for alternate sources, maybe dissenting opinions and whatnot. And it's tough. One of you mentioned the amount of information that we're expected to absorb on an ongoing basis. If you think in a single day, we are exposed to more information than someone like 100 years ago probably experienced in a week or maybe even a month, right? Just like the amount of then again, don't quote, there's the stats are out there. DuckDuckGo it if you don't want to Google it. And it's just the amount of information that's generated on an ongoing basis. Like every year we're generating more information than almost like the history of mankind up until the last 20 years or so, like every single day. And a lot of that are hot takes on social media. So if you want a little bit more nuance, maybe you want to go to a platform that encourages discussions with people's voices between human beings and not anonymous keyboard warriors. Instead, you can get anonymous oral warriors or something. We'll make it, Jamie. We'll have to workshop a name for that.
Yeah, I think we'll work on that one. You and I, we can get that one sorted out.
And Clubhouse has finally officially launched for Android users, and unfortunately, Tasia's not here to rant about Clubhouse. But it's been out.
I can rant about it if you'd like.
It's been about a year now, and it was initially the domain of the Silicon Valley types and whatnot. It's been interesting. I've sat in a couple of rooms, and but then a lot of it kind of devolved into a lot of people like shilling their products and services and courses and MLM schemes and all sorts of stuff. But Jamie, are you super excited that now finally you can join the ranks of the Clubhousers?
No, I was hoping that it would just stay an iOS exclusive. It seemed like an interesting little app and an interesting way of bringing people together. But from everything that I've read about it, it seems to have devolved into something that's less than desirable in many cases. One of the things that I was reading up on was that apparently a lot of the back-end infrastructure is actually based out of Shanghai. So there's a lot of privacy concerns as well with recorded audio and issues in that regard being shipped over to China, in essence, to put it very plainly. But so there's all sorts of interesting things there. It doesn't appeal to me that much. I enjoy podcasts from certain people now and again, but it seems like from what I've heard of it, I haven't actually been involved in any of the discussion. It's just not my thing.
Well, you have to get back to us once you download the app. And,
there you go.
You experience it for yourself.
Not available in Canada yet, I don't think.
Oh, we'll have to check that out. Yes, across the U.S. And in the other English-speaking countries will be getting it soon. Now, you may have noticed, and we've discussed this a little bit, that the other major platforms have been rushing to roll this sort of functionality out. We have Twitter Spaces and Facebook Hotline, which is in testing right now. And it reminds me of a discussion that Steve Jobs had with the founder of Dropbox 10 years ago or so, or probably even more now. And he said to the founder of Dropbox, like, you're a feature, not a product. And I don't think he was exactly right there. Dropbox has gone on to a fairly successful a fairly successful enterprise, and you have others like Box.net, but the functionality is also integrated into services like Google, into services like Apple's iCloud and whatnot. So maybe this social audio that Clubhouse has really popularized, is it simply a feature and not really strong enough to be a standalone product?
Well, we did see Twitter just integrate this with Spaces. And this is, it almost feels like a solution in search of a problem right now. The whole interactive appointment based, that I thought I was more excited about this. I think I was more excited about this, and then I started to realize the impact on my day to day life of you want me where for how long? You need my full attention. Do you realize how little of that I have for you? And then looking at the quality of the content that's come out of Clubhouse, I kind of looked at it and went, yeah. So who's going to buy you? And maybe that's it. Maybe that was the play, is this is going to get integrated into something. But, Facebook famously has gone on to maybe make an offer, but then just if they won't sell, they go build it themselves. So I wouldn't be surprised. Looking at this, I don't really think this is, unless there were some major changes to it, doesn't really feel like it's got legs to me right now. I feel like it's a nice addition to Twitter. I'd do it once in a while, but it wouldn't be my mainstay.
It kind of runs contrary to the trend we've seen over the last 20 years or so, where people are time shifting more and more. Ever since people learned how to do it with their VCRs, and especially the advent of the DVRs and PVRs, the digital video recorders, personal video recorders, we don't want to consume media on someone else's schedule anymore. Yeah. We want to watch or listen when we want to, hence the popularity of podcasts versus regular terrestrial radio. Now, the difference here being that there isn't the interactive portion to it. However, only so many people are on stage, and you have to be, knighted by the one of the organizers, one of the hosts of a given room, in order to be able to actually participate. Though, so they really need to build that value in order to make it compelling and to compete with the offerings from Twitter and Facebook in there.
I was about to say, it kind of feels like radio, whereas podcasts are like CDs. It's like play the music whenever you want. You can listen to whatever you want. If it's not going so well, skip ahead, or choose something else. But with Clubhouse, it always kind of feels like you're tied in. And to the point a little bit earlier about, some of these websites or social media conglomerates adding extra features. I just always think of things like Yahoo, or even Facebook had this problem too with all the apps. Sometimes I think it's better if you just focus on one thing and do it really well, which I think is one thing that Dropbox does really well. And I don't disagree with Steve Jobs. Well, I would never disagree with Steve Jobs, but I'm just saying
don't want to be excommunicated.
I don't want to be I wouldn't say that publicly. But
that's my job.
Exactly. But I think he got that one wrong, and history might actually say that, because they seem to be doing quite well. Now, having said that, iCloud, like you said, is just sort of part of the whole Apple ecosystem and is one of their offerings. But clearly Dropbox has been able to do that and do it well. So I think there's something to be said for not just seeing this as an extra add-on to add extra value to something like Facebook or something else. Now, having said that, I'm willing to try it, but I'm just saying initially my knee-jerk reaction is Yahoo got out of control. At certain times, Facebook has been out of control. Even things like when Google added, what was it called when they had their Facebook? We just talked about
Google Plus.
Google Plus.
Oh yeah, Google Plus.
Why do I need that? So just some of these things, like, they're not bad ideas, but it's just, I think there's something to be said for a company that focuses on something and does it well.
Must grow. That's capitalism for you, right? So that's the nature of the beast, I suppose. Now, speaking of features and brands versus sub brands and whatnot. Now, this is just a quick hit. This is more for Graham and me, but it speaks to the nature of the current automotive market. In this case, motorcycles. Harley Davidson has been working on a line of electric bikes called Livewire for the last number of years. And Graham and I actually got to see one in person in January 2015, I believe. We went to the Vancouver Motorcycle Show, and we saw the Harley Davidson Livewire prototype when they weren't in actual production yet, and it looked pretty cool. It was very different looking for a Harley Davidson. But then we also saw Zero Motorcycles, one of their models, and they were already on I think the third or fourth generation by that point, because they were an all-electric native motorcycle company. Graham, what do you think about this thought of taking the Livewire outside of the Harley Davidson brand and kind of spinning it off and letting it live or die on its own merits?
Yeah, I don't think it's a bad idea. personally. I look at it this way: there are Harley folks and there are non-Harley folks, from what I've seen, and the Harley folks almost seem offended by the idea of the electric. From the folks that I've talked to, I'm sure there are folks out there who love their Harleys and aren't. But would they love a live wire on its own? They just might. And for the non-Harley people out there who are looking at it, I think it probably was an obstacle for them. So, I'd want to take a look at the data behind it, but that doesn't seem like a terrible idea to me.
I think it's also, it kind of works both ways, because they may have shareholders that are saying, what are you doing messing around with this electric stuff? And then Harley says, okay, fine, we'll let it stand on its own and have its own P&L and et cetera, et cetera. And, they kind of almost wash their hands of it a little bit. But I think your point is bang on, is that your traditional Harley buyer is not really necessarily the target market, and vice versa. Like, I mean, I'm not really a Harley person because I have all sorts of connotations. Easy Rider in the 70s, like that's not me necessarily. But Zero on the other hand, which is electric native, and the Livewire, I mean, it's got a cool name. It's going to be people who won't even realize they're Harley Davidson. So that might appeal. So now all we have to do is get Jamie and Will to have proper midlife crises, and then they can join us.
Well, speaking to that, I was curious about these particular vehicles, and what I found odd is that the starter price for one of these motorcycles is $30,000 US, which is the same price as a Tesla. I'll just buy a Tesla instead when my midlife crisis happens. So, yeah.
I had a midlife crisis. I'm continuing to have a midlife crisis, and I just buy DJ gear to fill that hole.
Everyone needs a hobby. That's probably a little safer anyway.
It is a good looking bike. Like, straight up, it's a good looking bike. So,
is it a $30,000 good looking bike? I'm not so sure.
No.
And that's the thing, is like the Zero, I think, starts at around 13, 15K or so. It's like half the price. So
yeah. Well, and so without the Harley Davidson marketing behind it, with the brand, why spin it off? I don't really get that. It's like they're trying to sell the brand name without the brand name.
I think it's going to have to come down to performance. And so if it does perform and it's got that, if it's got a good ride, there are going to be people who will look at this and say, you know what, maybe this is my next bike, because there's lots of folks out there who will drop 30 grand on this. I'm just not there yet.
Now, what this branding does, however, and this isn't mentioned publicly, but it does open the door to Livewire to experiment in other micro mobility type products, because what we're seeing around the world is a lot of the uptake in EVs. There's a certain amount in full-on cars, of course, but we're seeing tons and tons of e-bikes and electric scooters. Now, you got a brand like Livewire. Sure, you could do e-bikes, electric scooters, full-on electric motorcycles. If that's Harley, can you imagine a Harley e-bike? Like, it doesn't,
really
So maybe that's part of the play here, because micromobility is growing by leaps and bounds every single year. And we're talking about the greening of cities and all this sort of stuff. I mean, only so many people are going to get on actual bicycles, especially if you live where some of us do, in very hilly regions where they try and put bike lanes on hills like that, and you see this many people on them. So get those people on an e-bike, and it's a little easier to tackle some of that terrain. So maybe they're playing the long game here. So TBD. Maybe they're playing 4D chess and we just don't even know it. So speaking of 4D chess, how would you like to be a billionaire and appear on a television show that's been going for almost 50 years and joke about cryptocurrency memes and plug all your different projects and companies while you're at it? What kind of opportunity is that? Elon Musk delivers laughs and tips hat to cryptocurrency on SNL. Did you guys see this on the weekend?
I did, yeah. I thought he was pretty good, actually. I mean, he came off as a robot computer a few times, but some of his stuff, like he did a Wario skit, which was really hilarious. That was not hilarious. I loved it. I guess maybe I'm a big Wario guy. Maybe. I'm a Wario. I'm gonna win. I'm a big Mario Kart fan, so I might be biased. I will admit that, but I thought many of them were quite funny. I thought he was better than expected. I guess I had low expectations.
I had low expectations as well, and we time shifted, as we alluded to earlier, and watched it the day after, I believe. And I wasn't expecting much because, what I thought was actually quite interesting, and it was almost a buttressing himself a little bit at the beginning of the show. He talked about how he was the first openly. What's the Asperger's host, and although he said there may have been others, that just didn't admit it. But that kind of gave me a little bit of pause and let me kind of say, okay, well, he's struggling with some of this stuff more than I probably would, but he's actually seems to be having fun with it. He seemed to be having fun the whole time, which was. It was kind of enjoyable. He was even on the news section that they have, the Weekend Update. Yeah. He even had a character on there, and again, it was stilted and awkward, but it was just Elon, and it was I don't know, it was this odd clash or a mixture of business and pop culture and science and everything all together, and I don't know, it just felt very meta.
And of course, the real-time fact checkers on Twitter made a point of stating that actually Dan Aykroyd also has Asperger's, and not only was he a cast member, but he also guest hosted in the past as well. So
there you go.
So I guess Elon's just a big liar.
But the other thing about Saturday Night Live is that this is not unprecedented. They do this over the years where they have people that are completely unqualified to be in a sketch comedy and end up doing the show. And I guess in the context of that, I thought he was quite good. Now, is he as good as when Chris Rock comes to guest host or somebody else who's an actor and a comedian? No, it wasn't as good. But, I thought given the situations and the sketches he was in, he definitely put himself all in. I think that's one of the things I like to the Wario sketches. He wasn't half in on that. He was all in on that. So, and you got to give somebody credit for that. Like that's to go in territory that's not necessarily your own and own it. I mean, I give the guy a lot of kudos for that anyways.
Yeah, and you've seen, of course, they've had Donald Trump on there. They had Steve Forbes on there back in the late 80s, I believe. And of course, a number of cameos from various politicians like Bob Dole and Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, and so on. And the Asperger's aspect is interesting as well, because when you think of a lot of the tech founders and CEOs, a lot of them are not necessarily declared, but you just know that some of them are going to be on the spectrum there. When you look at the personality types of a Mark Zuckerberg, a Bill Gates, even a Steve Jobs, a Jeff Bezos, I mean, to achieve what those sorts of people have achieved, you're not a normal, 100% standard, hewing to the norm human being.
Neurotypical.
Right? Neurotypical, exactly. So neurodiversity is our strength, apparently, and I enjoyed it. I thought he did well. Was okay with poking fun at himself. Now, Graham, there was the whole cryptocurrency aspect to it. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, this is our lovely next story. Dogecoin plunges nearly 30% during Elon Musk's SNL appearance. This is sort of the, buy the rumor, sell the news sort of thing. And I think we were all kind of expecting this sort of thing. That there's a big ramp up to it. And so this was really just sort of a bit of a correction. It's interesting, though, that we're seeing, not just Elon, but actors, celebrities, musicians, athletes, they're all starting to act as sort of almost de facto representatives of certain cryptocurrencies. Soulja Boy, of like one hit wonder Superman, many years ago, has emerged as a cryptocurrency fiend. And we're seeing people, and it's not altruistic. This is for gain for themselves. In Elon's case in particular, like he's got a stake in Dogecoin as well. So seeing these folks act as almost representatives of this, and we're starting to skirt some financial guidelines on some of these things, right? Like this is endorsement for sale in a lot of cases. And so, was I surprised by this? I don't think any of us were really surprised by this. But I'm curious to see what kind of comes out of this as people can kind of go forwards and pick up the banner of a given cryptocurrency.
It was interesting in the news segment, he did kind of cover his butt as the character he was playing, basically agreeing that Dogecoin was a hustle.
And here's the funny thing: it's a hustle that's made people millionaires. And I think for a lot of folks, they're looking at these different crypto projects and you're like, what's the utility? The utility to make me rich. What was unclear about this?
It's a meme.
And a lot of folks are kind of going, well, shouldn't there be something more to this? Isn't there more to this whole, like, are we creating payment methods that everybody around the world can use and low fees and take the power away from the banks or something? Like, give me something to grab onto. Oh, you're just making some cash. All right.
Fun fact, if you're in the US and you used all your stimulus checks to buy Doge when you received your check, you'd be worth, at its peak last week, about $400,000.
There you go.
Wow.
That would stimulate the economy for sure.
But, it's interesting. It's a little different, I think, than we saw in 2017 with the previous bull run, where there's a lot of there was altcoins, alternatives to the major cryptocurrencies. There were tons and tons of scams. I mean, there's lots now as well, but you saw a lot of celebrities sort of attaching themselves to these altcoins that were conducting ICOs or initial crypto offerings. And this feels a little different. I mean, it's funny though, you got people like Mark Cuban talking up Doge and others. The thing with Doge is that there is no fixed supply. There's no cap. They can just keep creating Doge until the cows come home. Unlike some like Bitcoin, which have a hard cap on the number. So there's some built-in scarcity there. So I don't know how closely people are paying attention to that are jumping on apps like Robinhood in the US and just throwing money at this fun dog-themed cryptocurrency. It could end
the developers have come back.
People.
The developers have come back. Like I think they left this project for dead. It's just it's out there and there's some money attached to it, whatever. But they've come back and said, it appears the dog is doing well, so we'll see if we can take care of it again. And so they're now looking at some of the same sort of tokenomics things that we're seeing going on with other cryptos. But what a fascinating thing for a software project to almost again just live on its own. And then I think somebody tapped the developers on the shoulder. Like, you guys have some money in this, don't you? Yeah, you're probably rich. You should maybe do something about this.
Especially for something that was meant to be a joke, meant to take the piss out of Bitcoin at the outset. And the funny thing is that there are groups, Dogecoin groups all around the world that get together for regular meetups. I'm not so sure during pandemic times, but there were. And it was a great way for people to learn about crypto and they teach newbies about setting up wallets and all that sort of thing. Now, to that point, I think last week I hinted that I had a little Dogecoin story, and I'll share it with you guys now. About 2.5 years ago, I did a keynote address and a workshop for a group of high school business educators, like teachers that teach like business ed and computer science and stuff like that. As part of the workshop, I had about 30 people in the class, and I had bought about $100 Canadian of Doge, loaded it into a wallet on my phone, and then got everyone in the workshop to download and install the wallet on their phones. And then I went around the class and then sent them each about $2 worth of Doge. This is 2.5 years ago when Doge was a fraction of a penny.
Did you leave any in your own wallet?
Oh, yes, I did, thankfully.
Oh, good.
So the funny thing is that when Doge hit its peak last week, that $2, 500 Doge I gave each of them, peaked at about $350.
Wow.
So I should probably contact them and say, but then I'll get a bunch of tech support calls. Oh, what do I do? I got a new phone. Like,
how do I get my wallet open?
Exactly. But I still had, I don't know, 20 or 40 bucks left in my wallet.
Oh,
and
great.
Did okay.
Yeah.
Did okay.
Not bad
I mean, I can't disclose for any officials that might be watching, but it's just nice. So it's funny. The best results I've ever had is just like experimenting a little and letting something sit for a few years, and then you go back later and like, ooh, would you look at that?
Well, and this is sort of the whole idea, I think, where people are seeing about some of these altcoins right now, where everyone's screaming, hold, which Bitcoiners have been doing for years. It'll be worth something someday. The time compression on this has happened. It's happening rapidly. It took Doge, what was it, like 9 years, 8 years, something like that, to get to where it is. We're seeing some of these tokens get there in weeks. And there's language that you'll hear, tokenomics, the idea of burning some of the coin that's available, because like Doge, you can keep making more of them, or there's a given amount, but in order to reduce the value of them, they burn a certain amount every time there's a transaction, and so these things go away. It's a little like Bitcoin only having a certain amount, but you end up with that reduction in volume. The other one, like just hold the line. We're here for a long time, not a good time. We're seeing people saying, well, I'm never going to sell. What's the point of having this then? But we're also seeing, again, utility come about. SafeMoon, Bonfire. Bonfire is looking at creating a social network, a decentralized social network, which we've heard before. I think was it Diaspora was supposed to be that thing many moons ago. SafeMoon's creating their own exchange and their own wallet, which could be a threat to Binance. So there's all of these things where if you're listening to this and going, what the hell is that? There's stuff going on in the crypto world where it's almost, again, people vying for their place in this. And it's fascinating to see. These projects, though, feel incredibly immature because when you do take a look at something, like I said, I've got a stake in Luna. I was looking at that network, and the rapidity at which they're building this out right now is terrifying. Like there are programs that are replacing investment and savings and all sorts of things. The stock market itself is being mirrored on Mirror Protocol. And that to me is, the dog one's funny. The SafeMoon thing is kind of a joke, but it's also making people a lot of money. The Bonfire thing, yeah, I get it. And then you've got these guys over here who are doing their work on this blockchain that actually is going to change people's lives. And if these are the on-ramps into people figuring something like that out, I'm good with it.
Well, speaking of moons, Elon Musk tweeted, on April 1st, mind you, SpaceX is going to put a literal Dogecoin on the literal moon. And now he's followed that up with an announcement. Graham, you are a resident space expert here. What's going on? Is he just trolling us more, or is there some substance to this story?
There's some substance to this. I believe this is actually a Canadian-made satellite that is going to be bringing this up there. There are tons of Canadian companies that actually do work in this space. SFU put up a couple of small pieces of scientific gear last year. Honestly, anything that gets people more interested in this, I'm into. The thing that, again, that I worry about, and this is something that we're actually seeing people look at right now, is, Doge lost 30% of its value. If this does crater, and a lot of people think that it will, my fear is that this is going to shake people's interest in cryptocurrency, and something like this could also shake their interest in space exploration. So I'm a little, like, Elon, you seem to know what you're doing with the whole marketing to people about space. So I'm going to give you this one, but I'm going to pay attention. I'll watch. I'm not going to buy any more Doge, but I'll definitely watch this.
It's all fun and games until someone loses their house. So what the quote is...
This is Elon. This wasn't a Chinese rocket, right? That's
yeah.
Thankfully, it was only the fish that were disturbed on that one.
Oh, yes, the rocket that came crashing down and no one knew where it was going to land. Jamie, what's it going to take to get you into Doge? What are we going to take to get you into some Doge today?
I wonder if it's an age-based thing, but I just sort of, as I get older, I feel like I've sort of missed the boat on all these newfangled gadgets that the kids play with these days.
Well, you are the oldest one here.
Yeah, I suppose I am, aren't I? But it's a bit of a, like you say, buy stuff, hold on to it, and see what happens. I have old Star Wars figures. I've got a Jawa in my basement that has the original PVC jacket, and apparently it's worth like $700. So,
Jamie, I want to hear the new album from Jawa in my basement. That's my favorite band.
That was yeah. I almost named my high school band that, actually. Yeah. So Jawa in my basement. So it's really, I think a lot of it's just ultimately, and this is what I tell my kids, a lot of it's just gambling, just like the stock market. No matter what you're doing, if you're investing in stuff, you're just betting on what you think other people think it has value, if it has value or not. So whether that be stocks and bonds and currency, or whether it be a virtual currency, and ultimately you can't really ever predict. So I just go to Vegas and just regular old gamble. That's fine by me.
You usually do pretty well at it too, don't you?
I do okay. I do all right. I got it figured out.
There was a wise philosopher. I think everyone is missing this piece of wisdom from the wise philosopher, which said, "Set it and forget it."
Mm.
Mr. Popeil.
Yeah.
Oh, right.
Well, they say that people who trade, the more frequently people trade, whether it's crypto or traditional financial instruments, the more they trade, the less well they do. Also known as the worse they do. The people who just basically take dollar cost average in and go for the long haul tend to perform better over time. Well, that totally spoils our whole Pokemon craze, though. Will, what's going on with Pokemon? It's the original NFTs, or so you say.
Yeah, I think part of the reason why I suggested this story is A, it's crazy and interesting, but B, it feeds into a lot of what you and Gray have been talking about, Tristan, in terms of cryptocurrency, and we've talked about in past stories with NFTs and some of the stuff going back to, was it December, with GameStop and some of the stock there is people investing in other things. And one of the interesting things that we see, especially things like GameStop, or one of the stocks that was trading was the former shell company for Blockbuster that didn't own anything, went up like 1,000% or whatever it was. But one of the interesting things here, from this article and from several articles and things that I've read, is that Pokemon cards are going through the roof. In fact, Jake Paul, who doesn't do anything for publicity. I mean, he's genuine and sincere every time he does anything. But he spent $2 million on original unopened packages or boxes of cards. Spent $2 million on them. Cards are going for $300,000 from the Chorzo original cards. And part of this, I think, is you're seeing the younger generation invest in things. Now, you can't say that this is just the comic book hockey guard craze of the early 90s resurfacing. But one of the things here is that it's not kids, right? It's those kids that have grown up, a lot of them, or slightly younger. And they have discretionary income, especially, being at home during the pandemic and investing in things that they want to invest in. So it's become a bit of a pseudo economy, people buying single cards for $250,000. But the other interesting thing that's happened as a result is, let's say you have a Chorzo card that's a rare, popular card from the first generation. Now that card could be worth $10,000 or it could be worth $300,000. And the difference between those two is a lot of small little details. How well was it cut? How vivid are the colors? Are there damage on the corners? Is this a good representation? Was it scuffed? Was it in some kid's lunch bag? There's a real difference between those things. And one of the things that helps determine the value is ratings. So someone gets a card rated by a professional rating company, and this has been going on for years with comic books and sports card and sports memorabilia, basically making it authentic, giving it a rating in terms of how good a representation and what condition is it in. And that makes the big difference between your crumpled card at the bottom of your bag or this card that's in a case with all this fancy print on the top. Now, the thing that has caught the industry, the professional sort of rating and certification of memorabilia has caught these companies off guard, is the sheer number of cards that are coming into them with requests to be rated or people willing to pay to get them rated. So the market just isn't prepared for all the people that want to see if they have a 300,000 Chorzo card. So I think that's sort of the other interesting story, which again is driving this whole new economy about people setting up new sort of ways of investing, new ways of collecting. And, I kind of missed I don't know about you guys. I missed the boat. I was too old. I was into, clothes and girls by the time Pokemon cards came around. So I kind of missed this one, but I wish I hadn't. I wish I had some old Pokemon cards.
I wasn't able to get the actual book or books here, but my boys are now 23 and 21, and they have a collection. So there is 2 binders full of Pokemon cards upstairs. I'm not giving out my address. And we had to look through some of them, and there's no the ultra crazy ones, but just looking at the basic cards, some of them, the minimum value is $6. Well, they've got hundreds of these cards, and they could sell these binders for hundreds and probably thousands of dollars just as is. It's again just They've just had them in binders, and they weren't used. They weren't thrown around like we used to throw our Wayne Gretzky rookie cards around when we were kids. Who knows? Who knows? We haven't gone through them in great detail, but there might be some interesting ones in there. So I got a bit adjacent on that one. So just got the curve on that one there. Yeah,
it's the solution to the student loan crisis, right
there.
There
you are.
Well, yeah, we have a friend actually who has a number of sports cards, I believe heavily in the basketball card realm, and there are sent them off a few months ago for grading, and they're so backed up. I believe he is yet to hear back, and we're going on months now.
I talked to him today, and I asked him, and not yet.
It's been like since January, I think.
Yeah, I think so.
So I haven't even cracked open my tub of 3,000 plus hockey cards. Maybe a Wayne Gretzky rookie card in there. Again, my address. Not going to dox myself, but I only have one. And I took pretty good care of my hockey cards. I didn't play Farsies and Topsies and all those games. I hung around for scrambles when people threw their cards in the air because they were drunk or something. I don't know why you would ever do that. But I kept mine in pretty good shape. But it's like, I was just holding on to them for the future. But there was a bit of a bull run on sports cards in the 90s, and then they kind of dropped off again. But there was, I think, a grade 10 rookie Gretzky rookie card that was sold just a few weeks ago for like in the seven figures, I believe. It was crazy. So like, well, nostalgia is great and all, but I'd be willing to cash some of that in.
This is one other quick story about trading cards. I have an old box of cards, and I have some odd hockey cards, but I've also got some other different cards. So I've got some Superman 2 cards. I've got featuring the real General Zod, I have Mork and Mindy cards. Ooh. I have Grease cards, and I have Star Wars cards. And so because I did learn that there are some valuable Star Wars cards, and I realized, I better check my cards. And I started looking at some of these cards, and I'm like, wow, these look like these cards. Whatever. And I'm going through them, and they're in very good condition. And then I realized I'm Canadian. These have French on them, English and French. They're worth like $5 where they should be worth like 50 grand. So that was a bit disappointing. But
the all-time best. I love that collection. I think I have some more Mindy cards somewhere. My all-time favorite ridiculous card. You guys might have heard of it. The Desert Storm collection.
I have some. Yes, I do.
Just ridiculous looking back. Now I don't know why.
General Schwarzkopf.
I have General Schwarzkopf.
Yeah, so
I also have the Glock for some reason.
I've got like an M5 tank or something like that. I've got all sorts of. It's really disturbing, actually, when looking back on it.
Looking back on it, it made sense at the time for some reason, but now it just doesn't look good. Not a good look, as they say.
No.
So, speaking of Pokemon. There was, of course, we had Pokemon Go, sort of an augmented reality game that was popularized by a company called Niantic a few years ago. That was a division of Google. And Jamie, you were one of the early adopters of Ingress, their original game, and then Pokemon Go, which was popular a few years ago. Well, there's a few crypto-related augmented reality games that claim to be like the Pokemon Go of crypto. And one that's been around a couple of years is called Aircoins. And it came on my radar recently because there is a new coin that they have added to the type that they are airdropping all over the map, known as Badcoin. And Badcoin launched a couple of years ago, and it's optimized for mining on crappy old hardware. So I actually have 3 old laptops, anywhere from 12 to 9 years old, and they're churning away, making these bad coins. I mean, they're not worth anything at this point, but even if there's any little uptick in price in the future, it could be something interesting. So now they've done a partnership with this Aircoins app. So not only can you find Aircoins out in the wild, which you can redeem for additional features in the app, and there's a little bit of e-commerce stuff going on there. You can find bad coins. They've got Doge coins in there and some other interesting novelty coins and collectibles as a fun way to get people into it. Jamie, could this be your gateway drug into the world of crypto?
I overdosed. Thank you on augmented reality games back with Ingress. I tried some Pokemon Go, and I think I've had my fill.
Remember how much exercise we got? How many steps we got in?
I know. Well, and I actually to this day I still have some very good friends that I met through Ingress. That was the reason I actually really enjoyed the games, because it was actually a social way of getting together out in the world, and you got to meet people who were playing the same game, and it was we were oddly all similar temperaments, and we enjoyed the fun of it, enjoyed having to go places to play this game. And then Pokemon Go was built on that shell of Ingress. But I don't know, the tying in crypto again. I think I just have to start yelling at kids to get off my lawn. That's kind of where my fun is these days. I think I'm just getting too old for these kind of strange mishmashes of things going together. But who knows? Maybe I'll get out there and start mining some bad coins to feed to a dog. Is that how it works? I don't really understand.
That's exactly how it works.
Okay.
Well, if you see me wandering around your street staring at my phone, you know exactly what I'm doing.
I will understand what you're doing.
Before you
He's not stalking you.
Sure, yeah. He said that way too many times for me to believe it now.
Well, we'll have to get Graham and Will. I think we were all in Ingress at one point.
At one point, we maybe all gave it a try. Yeah.
I think you were patient zero on that, Jamie.
I was early ground zero.
Can I tell a little bit of an Ingress story?
Sure.
The statute of limitations is gone, right?
Yes,
so,
yeah.
I remember driving back from Gray's once with Tristan, and he had his phone going and had me on the tablet.
Yeah.
And you were I guess attacking things as you went. That's what we were doing. I barely remember Ingress, but you were attacking like nodes as we were driving.
Yeah, portals. Yeah. That's how it worked. Yeah. Oh, yeah. There's all sorts of crazy stories.
The good old days. Well, now we're all banned. We're all retroactively banned.
Yeah, there you go.
From Ingress. Listen, we've got a couple more stories to do, but we're out of time, so we're going to have to push a couple off until next time. But I do want to mention, Jamie, aka Tasia, you've got a new video this week. Can you tell us all about it?
Sure. Yeah, it's we're talking about pole dancing, and I don't know what you're talking about. I have no idea what you're talking about.
Gmail tips: 8 Gmail settings every user should know. Jamie, are you a Gmail user? You're Mr.
I am actually. Yes, I do. I use Gmail and other types of email, but yeah, Gmail's useful.
What do you like? What do you like most, or what's some of your favorite features about Gmail?
I like the integration with Google as a whole. Again, it's designed to be sort of ecosystem centric, but there's some parts of Gmail, the way that they thread the emails, that I'm not a big fan of. So I think you can change that in the settings. But Gmail itself is it's very stable, very little spam, if any. So it's a pretty solid platform overall.
Well, you would have you and Tasia definitely be on the same page there. She is definitely a Google gal. So thanks very much, Jamie Reynolds, for joining us this week. William Silver, thank you. Gray Williams, and you can follow us at momentous.tv on the web, twitter.com/momentous.tv, facebook.com/momentous.tv, instagram.com/momentous.tv, and good luck finding us on YouTube. We don't have a vanity URL yet, but you can find youtube.com/Tasia Custodi.
Bitter.
And you may be able to... I missed that.
I said bitter. You're bitter about not having.
Oh, yeah. I'm at youtube.com/TJMJutra. Long story. But you can find Momentous stuff on there as well. So, baby steps, guys. Baby steps. Thanks so much. We will see you next week on Momentous Live.